Hi again, this is Joey Hunter from Era Stories, bringing you Fred J. Devito. But before we meet Fred, who is sitting beside me, I want to say we had a little absence, that we were away, regrouping. Uh, we also, in that time, had went to one of the biggest and most fabulous reunion parties of everybody in the business, from the golden years, which I say are the 60s, 70s, 80s, and part of the 90s. So here's where I saw Fred again. Fred has been in the business probably as long as I have, maybe, no, not as long, because I started in the 60s. And Fred, when I knew him, was with Revlon. He was creative director with Revlon. He was creative director over at Bloomingdale's. He now has his own podcast, a blog, I should say, called Social Culture. And have you ever wondered what it's like when you look at an ad? When you look at the ad, you say, wow, that model's gorgeous. Then you say, oh, that's that famous photographer. He did this and he did that. Do you ever wonder who created that ad? Who was the guy or the girl behind who came up with the idea, who was able to present it to the client and say, this is what I want to do? And for the client to say, and we're talking about huge clients, say like a Revlon, to say, yes, I'd love to do it, and put millions of dollars into that. Now, also, that person has got to figure out the best photographer for the job. Not only the best photographer, but the best models for that job. And of course, then there's a collaboration between photographer and agent and the creative person or the person who developed the idea. That's what we're going to talk about today. And Fred J. Devito is that person. So basically, I want to ask Fred to start off of, where'd you come from and how did you ever get into this business?
I grew up in Saratoga Springs area, and I was inspired by my parents in reference to fashion because they were very stylish.
They were dandies.
No, they weren't dandies. They weren't really dandy, but they were stylish. And so I was always involved with the fashion or the personal style because of them. So that's how I had interest. And when I was in grammar school, I guess I was in 10th grade, maybe. I'm sorry, not 10th grade. 6th grade.
6th, 7th grade.
I drew different girls on paper with a pencil from different countries, Switzerland, Japan, Italy, etc. And these drawings were for the International Beauty Contest. So that was sort of my first entree into fashion.
And beauty, right.
And beauty. So, and then...
so basically, you were very interested in art.
Always interested in art. Always, yes, always interested in art from this big. So then how did I get to New York?
Yeah, how did you get to New York from Saratoga Springs?
Well, I went to school in Boston for 2 years, and my major was fine arts, and my minor was psychology. And then I transferred to Syracuse University, and I said to myself, I could do my fine art anywhere. So I got into visual communications, advertising, and graphic design. My girlfriend at the time, who I didn't know, she was also a transfer student from a Boston school, and she went to Syracuse. Her name is Beth. So in the fall of our graduation year, one weekend, Beth and I moved from upstate New York and then from Philadelphia to New York City.
Oh, wow. So you went to Philly first, Philadelphia first.
Well, that's where she lived. So
she lived there.
She lived there. So we moved me from my friend Ken Hobart helped us move from upstate to New York, and then from Pennsylvania or Philadelphia to New York.
So now you realize, though, that New York was the hub, and
Right.
it was the place you were going to make it or break it.
Right. And I always knew I would be in New York because my grandfather, who had a few restaurants here and owned horses, we always visited. So I was, again, very inspired by the culture and the style of the city. So I knew when I was a very young person, I would be coming here.
You'd be coming in. Now, are we talking about the 70s?
I graduated, I went, 75 is when I came to New York.
All right, so that was when it was at its height, you know, as far as I'm concerned, of the modeling business, which I call the golden age of modeling. I mean, I think the models were beautiful, the agents were working as hard as they could, the creative people, they were ad agencies, and people collaborated on ads and worked together. And I really felt that was the beginning, you know, so you came on the scene really when it all started to happen.
Yes, yes. And actually, my first job was with Carnegie Hall as a graphic designer, which I got from the New York Times, believe it or not, which was a great job because I worked on their program Intermezzo, which was a larger format than Playbill. And then I got this opportunity for Bloomingdale's, which I started as a graphic designer, but ended up as fashion art director. So yeah, it was just very inspiring period.
So at Bloomingdale's, you must have worked with some of the most beautiful girls and handsome guys and great photographers. Am I correct?
I worked with the best, internationally, domestic, style, including hairstylists, stylists, makeup artists. Yes, my first shooting, I hired Eric Bowman, and the first two models I worked with was Apollonia and Janice Dickinson.
Oh my God!
For a Terry Mugler ad that ran.
Oh, I could imagine.
Yeah, which I do promote and I share on social media every so often. Yeah, the models back then were very special, and not that they're not special today, but they were more of a celebrities back then. They were special. Today, I can't tell you any model that I can recognize or.
Well, we all had names then.
Right.
The girls had names, the guys had names. Everybody worked together, and you, in the middle of this, a young guy, here you are, you created the ad, you loved those two girls for it, and of course, you had your choice of photographers, but Eric was a great photographer at that time, and you had to see the synergy of the whole free working, because it was going to fall on you if it was a flop.
Right.
You know, Bloomingdale's was going to come down on you and say, Fred, what are you doing to me? You know, we just spent $100,000 on this shoot, and I have to throw it away, you know? So basically, you were so important because you had to get the right guy, the right photographer, with the right temperament, and to be able to deal with these two models. Now, Janice wasn't easy to deal with, and Apollonia wasn't the easiest to deal with. So you really had your hands full.
True. But on that particular shooting, everyone behaved. It was a good group.
It was a good
and
team.
Barbara Dente was the stylist, and Christiane did the hair.
Barbara Dente, man, oh my God.
Yeah. So yeah, they you know, it was a great shoot, and it was my first. So
it was your first.
So you know, I was a little anxious, obviously, but working with these stars, we did a great job.
So you were at Bloomingdale's for how long?
I was at Bloomingdale's for 6 years.
6 years. Did you have anything to do with the shopping bags and stuff like that?
Yes. I was on the team that created the big brown bag. And I worked on several other, I designed and collaborated with several other shopping bags, and many of them are archived in the Cooper Hewitt Museum.
Yeah.
So, and actually, because of that, I have a tremendous shopping bag collection
You do.
that I need to find a home for. Yes.
Please don't use the bags to throw the trash out. Huh?
No.
So from Bloomingdale's, what was your next step?
So after Bloomingdale's, I was interviewing, and a few companies were interested in me. One was Vogue, and one was Revlon. So I was at an interview with Vogue, and I'm meeting with this editor, and then the door opens, and I turn around, and it's Polly Mellon. And she comes in and starts talking to the interviewer. And then she goes, "Who is this guy?" And I just was like, and the interviewer said, "Well, he's here for a possible art direction job." "Oh, really? Is this his book?" And I said, "Yeah." So she looked at it and she goes, "Yeah, it's great. Very good." So, for example, if I was making $10 at Bloomingdale's,
Right.
Revlon offered me $12 and Vogue offered me $8. So I accepted Revlon.
Of course.
The first week I was at Revlon, Vogue called me and said, "Fred, we found your funds. Please join us." And I just couldn't do that. But it was just great that Polly
Mellon really
loved my
recognized your talent.
Yeah, and she, it was great that.
Now, how long were you at Revlon?
I was there for 2 years.
2 years. All right, and you've worked with some great models there too.
Yeah.
Were you there when Evelyn Kuhn worked? And it was Evelyn was a model. Lauren Hunton, I think, was before.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. I was in the creative marketing division. So what we did, we came up with concepts for the advertising department.
I see.
But I also worked on the displays and things. So that's where I would hire photographers and models and things.
Right. So now from Revlon, what was the next step?
Then I started my own advertising and design studio. And
was that called Fred J. Devito?
Fred J. Devito, Inc., Art Direction and Design.
And I was saying, you put the J in there, you were saying before. Were there a lot of DeVitos at that time?
Well, it just keeps me apart. I mean, the first person, for my own identity, my father's name is Fred Devito. So with Fred J. Devito, we both have our own identities.
I was telling you, it's funny, my really good friend who people said we looked alike, and he was a musician. His name was Don DeVito.
Right.
And he wound up at Columbia, which became Sony. Excuse me, he produced people like Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen. So he was in the rock and roll business when I was an agent. And so we had a great synergy because he'd invite me and whoever I wanted to take to all the rock shows.
Oh, great.
In the garden, and give us backstage passes. And we had a ball. So, all right, now you start your own studio.
Right. So I have been blessed, honestly, because it was always based on word of mouth. So my clients included Bergdorf Goodman, the American Museum of Natural History, Karl Lagerfeld, Hermes, Diane van Furstenberg, and many others. So it was a great time. Great time.
It was a great time. And you did that for how long?
Well, I still have my agency.
You still have the agency?
I moved from my studio in the historic Cable Building in 2011, and I started my company in 2082 when I left Revlon. So 82 to here,
So you must have a lot of experiences and a lot of stories that's happened in those years.
I have a few.
Between photographers and models. And
I have a few.
Yourself and... did you, once the pictures were taken, let me ask you, this is for my own notification, did you have the final say on what you presented to the client?
Well, I definitely had an input. And sometimes I did have the final say.
Presented.
Yeah.
Because basically you did everything in-house.
Yeah.
And then you'd get it together and you'd say, okay, Revlon, here it is.
Yeah. So I would usually present 3 images. Let's say an ad, an ad for, and so those are the ones I loved, and usually they would pick the one that I really liked, or they might like the secondary one, but they were still great.
Right, of course. Yeah. Of course. So what I'm saying is that nobody talks about you, but they'll talk about the photographer that shot the picture, and they'll talk about the girl that's in the picture. Now, these days, it's a little different, too. They don't talk about the photographer, they don't talk about the girl, and they don't talk about where this ad came from, or who created it, It's sort of become intermeshed,
Right.
But when I was in the business and I was an agent, even when I was a model back in the 60s, but I'm talking about 70s and 80s, we knew all the creative directors.
Right.
We knew the art directors, whatever you wanted to call them. Most of them, we knew who the photographers were personally, and we knew the models personally. And we knew when a photographer hooked up with a certain model for certain jobs, and we knew exactly what the creative director wanted, If they would call the agency and they were looking for a certain type, we had that type for them. We had looked for that type because we knew what everybody wanted, you know? And I don't see that in today's world. I don't feel it. I'm not really immersed in the fashion business now, more or less as an expert in the legal end of it. But what do you feel about all that, Fred, now? Because you're still involved.
Well, as far as creative directors, art directors, we're behind the scenes.
Right.
We do come up with the concept and we hire the talent. I think it's certainly different. It's certainly different now than it was. I think budgets are less. I think there's hardly no location shootings. Like when I worked with Bergdorf Goodman, my client, I worked on several fashion books, and we would go on location for different areas for a month. We would have models coming in and out, over that time.
And you would stay down there.
Yeah, I would stay there with the photographer, the stylist, and the hair and makeup. But those days are gone.
They're gone, yeah. I remember when they used to shuffle models in and out.
Yeah.
You'd have a different model going down each week, to a different location. And everything was set up there to shoot. Excuse me, guys, I have allergies this week. I'm going to pop a lozenge in my mouth. But those were the days. Now, tell me a funny story, a location story. Everybody's got one.
Those certainly were the days. So this is not necessarily a spicy story.
Well,
but this was
doesn't have to be spicy.
I have 2 stories. This was on the photo shooting for Bergdorf Goodman in Lake Tahoe. So one of the models, the female models, came up to me one day saying, there seems to be one of the other girl models who are disappearing at night. I said, Then the next day, a male model said the same thing. And so I asked the model who was disappearing, I said, I'm hearing this story. Is that true? And she goes, well, yes, it is. I met a guy in town. He picks me up at night and he returns me in the morning. And I said, okay, seeing that I'm responsible for the shooting and the talent, I said, if there's anything you need or anything goes wrong, I'm here for you. So anyway, when I came back, I found out about 2 months later, this particular model moved to Lake Tahoe. And then about a year later, she married that guy.
That guy.
Yeah.
Well, that was nice.
Yeah.
See, that's a great story. That's a great story.
Another story was, and Jean Pagliuso photographed that.
Jean, oh my God. You know, she's living in the Hamptons,
Oh, no, I didn't.
still married to that
Tommy.
Tommy.
Yeah. They have the one.
Yeah, the
And
one shot.
actually, Linda Mason was the makeup artist on that shooting, and both I allowed Linda bringing Daisy, her daughter, and Jean bringing her small daughter. So they were all part of the team also. Um, so yeah, so that was that shooting. And then another shooting, William Garrett, where William Garrett was the photographer, was in Lake Powell. And a couple of nights we slept on the boat. And I was sleeping on the deck one night. And all of a sudden there's like this music playing. And, you know, everybody was kind of confused because it was like late.
Yeah.
And they came up on the deck, except for two models, a guy and a girl. And the boat started swaying. So I said to myself, well, they're either doing dancing or something else. So anyway, so that's my other story. So we don't know really. That could
They
be
know what they were doing.
That could be spicy depending the way you look at it.
Yeah. Well, there's a million stories like that, and you know, but the key to it is that everybody got together and everybody worked together.
True.
And in all the years that I was in the business, I don't know too many tragedies about bookings and about locations. I know a lot of good memories and a lot of kids coming back and telling me how great a time. Not that there haven't been tragedies in their lives later on. And a lot of the models who couldn't handle it, you know, broke down during my time in the business. But most of the time it was a happy time and it was a good time and everybody enjoy themselves. Now, tell me, you have a blog.
Yes, it's called, if you want to access it, it's fredjdevito.com/street scene / and it's Devito with a DE, not a DI. Yes, I started my blog in 2014. I started with photographing people on the street that I appreciated their personal style. And then I met someone at Harry and Nancy's party back then. I don't know which one, but it was definitely at the parlor where I met this person. And this person, who is Helen Oppenheim, she asked me to collaborate with her on Fashion Week, which I still do. So it morphed in from, you know, personal style on the street to events, to New York Fashion Week. And I also cover galleries. Like I just covered Dennis Peele at the Staley Weiss.
Oh, right.
And this past weekend upstate, there's 1 Mile Gallery, and they had a very interesting. So I cover different things.
Now, Dennis Peele was a very good photographer.
Yes.
And he worked for a lot of years with us. The other gallery, was that a photography exhibit?
Staley Weiss, yes.
Staley Weiss?
Recently, yeah.
And who was the photographers in that?
Dennis.
Oh, Dennis, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Dennis was, you know, as we say, we knew the names of the photographers. Half the time now, I don't know who's shooting what, unless I read it.
Right. Before, you could look at a photograph and you can say, that's a Patrick DeMarchelier.
Exactly.
Or a Dennis Peele
That's
or whatever.
Francesco.
So, right. So they had their individual style, which you can identify with. Today, I agree with you. I can't.
You can't tell them apart.
I can't tell who's who.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if that's in editorial, I should say. I'm not sure if that's the issue of the photographers or the editors of the magazines, where they just want, you know what I mean? I'm not sure.
I think we were more creative I think we took more chances.
Right.
I think guys like yourself, the creative people, gave us more of a challenge. Not us, but photographers and stylists and hairdressers. I mean, that's when
Yeah.
hairdressers decided to cut girls' hair or this and that, and the girls would scream and yell, and all of a sudden they were famous.
Right.
And that was the way to do it, you know. But I think people took more chances and weren't afraid to take the chance.
Yeah, I think oh, as you're saying, I think it was more creative. Um, you know, I rented an airplane once, and the photographer, unfortunately, I don't remember his name, but the talent was Jerry Hall, Apollonia, and Janice Dickinson. So they were on the wing. This is for a Santo D'Orazio. So you don't see that kind of thing today.
Yeah. Oh,
So I think overall we were more creative, and I know when this ad that I'm talking about, there was no budgets at Bloomingdale's at that point.
yeah.
So you didn't have to worry about. I mean, it was great. I mean, obviously, when the economy changed, things
Yeah.
did change.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, budgets are out of sight. You know, they'd spend on places and things and go places, and I couldn't believe it myself, you know, for an ad, to do
Right,
something.
right.
And they pay the models tremendous amounts of money to get the girl or the guy that they wanted
And travel
for
time
the
as
job,
well.
plus traveling. And I remember at that time too, the Concorde was in style.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to go on the Concorde.
I did an ad with the Concorde. Yeah.
Right, right. Oh yes, let's go to Paris, but we got to take the Concorde.
Yeah. No, there were great times. I'm so excited that I was at Bloomingdale's when Bloomingdale's was Bloomingdale's.
Oh,
You know, that was a time like Candy Pratt's was there, and she was designing these incredible windows. You know, it was just a great time.
yeah. Cal was in the men.
Cal
Right.
came later. He wasn't there when I immediately
he
came,
wasn't.
but Cal was a force to contend with. He was I was privileged to work with him.
And was Leonard Restivo after you or before?
No, Leonard Restivo and Nancy Brasley, they hired me.
Oh, they hired you.
They hired me. And actually, Bea Feitler, who was hired as a freelancer, she was working on the Guy Bourdin Intimate,
Right, the Pharaoh.
that Guy Bourdin show. And I worked with her as an assistant art director. And I'm like this little kid who just came to New York City. So I was like thrilled, you know, and it's a great, you know, I have a great history.
Yeah, I like Bea Feitler. That's a name, you know. And I remember I mean, she was an editor. She found up an editor someplace.
Yeah.
And like all these people from one place was found at another place and another place. And it was like growing up with them,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
We all, you know, like in the 60s, I was a model, then I was an agent, then I became an owner. You know, and I was dealing with the same people. We all came up the same way, you know, working hard and, you know, getting promoted. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't know if it's like that anymore, you know.
I would have to say it has to be to a certain degree. Some places got to be like that. I mean, you know, I'm not. I mean, both of us are not like in the thick of the fashion
Of the
industry
fashion
now,
business now.
but you know, we're satellites presently,
Right.
so we do have a sense. So I would think that it depends. I think that there could be, and then there's not to be.
I think a lot of the intimacy is gone.
You think not? Yeah. Well, I think basically what we're saying, when you look at a magazine, you can't identify what the photographer is. That reinforces.
For instance, do you think, I don't know what that is, but do you think we could ever have a party like Nancy and Harry put together? I mean, do you think the models, like 20 years from now, the models from 20,005 are going to put together a party like like Harry and Nancy put together with the models from the 70s and 80s?
They could, but again, the flavor of our generation and the work that we've done can never be replaced.
Can never.
We were, in a sense, trailblazers.
Yeah.
And it's a great time at Harry and Nancy's party. Now it's held at Slate, so it becomes a disco party.
Yeah.
And I just covered it on my blog. And if anyone wants to see it, please look. There's like
disco,
almost 100 pictures.
Disco was our era.
Disco was and I'm still not over Studio 54.
So I identify with that. But the intimacy at the party too. When you go into one of their parties, there's always somebody you know. And then if you don't know them by first look, when they say, "Oh, hi, this is so-and-so," say, "Oh my God, Jesus Christ, I talked to you on the phone for 10 years, you know?"
Right. Yeah, and there's everybody there. There's models, male and female, hairstylists, fashion stylists, model people who worked in the model industry, and then, friends and families of Harry and Nancy's. So, it's a great time. And I love to dance. And
well, as you said before, I kind of liked it when it was a little more intimate, because a lot of people get up there and dance. And I understand it, because when you get a few of these guys and girls that are locked up in Connecticut with their families, can't wait to get to
they want to party.
They jump around and scream and yell like they did in the old days.
I mean, we did dance at like Parlor and the club room, but the space was tiny.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really a dance party.
Yeah.
And the music is loud, but people still have conversations.
Fred, I seem to remember, and I may be wrong, a lot of places had casting directors, right? Photographers had like somebody did the casting for them. Ad agencies had somebody who's casting. Creative people had, I believe, favorites, or people they wanted to see in their ads, in their ideas.
Right.
Like in your idea, like if you were thinking about something, you'd say, "Oh, that girl who I saw in this would be perfect for this.
Right.
I think she's the right type." So now you'd portray that to the other people you hired to do this.
Right. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, like, if you're advertising a dress campaign or doing a dress campaign, you want a female model that can project what this dress is about. Is it an elegant dress? Is it junior? So it's important to pick the right model for
the right face.
Right.
So now, say you went to the photographer and said, "I noticed you worked with Janice and Apollonia." So say you went to a photographer and said, you hired the photographer. He came in, he said, "What do you want done, Fred? This is what I want done." He says, "I was thinking of Janice or Apollonia." And he says, "Well, can I show you a few other people?" Right? So he then would present who he liked or who he worked with. So you take that into consideration.
For sure. It's a collaboration. I have I'm working for either a client or I was working for Bloomingdale's or Revlon. So, I had to get these things approved before I proceed to a shooting.
Right.
So other than that, so if a photographer said, I would like to recommend X and Y, I said, great, well, let's see them. Let's meet with them.
Right.
Let's see what the clients think, and sure.
Right. So you'd present. So the photographer would have 2 or 3 kids he likes. You'd have 2 or 3 kids you like, and once you had it all the pieces in place, then you go to the client and say, look, we're going to shoot it in Hawaii.
Right.
This is the photographer. This is the hair. This is the makeup. And this is who we're thinking about.
For modeling, yes.
Do you have preferences or don't you?
Right.
And it would be the client with the final say.
Correct.
Unless you had something really against
yeah.
the person and you say, you can't book that person. I'm not going to spend a week in Hawaii with that person.
Right. And sometimes it could be that way.
You know? A lot of times.
I know. I mean, thankfully I didn't have,
you know,
any experience like that. But there was one time I was ready to ship a hairstylist out.
Exactly. I mean, I had clients call me and say, you know, I want to book so-and-so. And it's 3 days in Puerto Rico. Get her on the phone and say, are you going to fuck things up or are you going to work and be nice?
It's important.
And I'd get on the phone and say, look, it's a great job, but please keep your mouth shut. Or,
no, yeah.
you know, don't sit in the sun. Don't get burnt. Don't, you know,
right.
Stay out late. Are you going to promise me this? I had to get promises out of them.
No, it's important because, you know, if one of the talents, you know, whoever, it could have been assistant, photographer, a model, a hairstylist, you know, once they put in a bad bug into the shooting, it affects everybody.
It does affect everybody. So you got to make sure that they're going to be professional is really the word to say.
Exactly.
Because a lot of people get burnt when not burnt by the sun, but by different people. Could be a hairdresser, could be a stylist, could be anybody. No.
I have to say, you know, I've had some traumatic experiences, but overall, they were great. And, you know, and other, you know, in between shooting and reviewing the clothes for the next day and all that kind of stuff, you know, we did have fun. It was a nice community.
It was fun.
Yeah.
No matter how crazy, no matter all the antics that we put up with or went through, everybody seemed to have fun.
And I've never been a morning dove, and to wake up at the crack of dawn for me was always a challenge to catch the light. But you know, you did it.
And to get good pictures. Everybody got their good pictures and satisfied.
And that's just the beginning. You know, the client approval, reviewing the talent, hiring the talent. Then it's time to go back, edit the film, put it in an ad format or fashion
That's
book.
your job.
Yeah, put it in the fashion book format, whatever, and then show the client. You know, first you show them all the film, let's say for Bergdorf Gilman. All the buyers come, the vice president, you know, it's like a big deal. And, you know, you show 3, and, you know, everybody has an opinion.
All right, let me ask you something. When copy is set, a lot of times they'll set the copy before. Like, make sure, let's see, it's Brill Cream or something.
Right.
You have to find the pictures, too, that are going to go along with that copy, too.
Yeah.
They've got to sort of, some way.
Yeah. You need to marry with the copy or...
Yeah, marry it, that's right.
Accent that concept. In my experience, honestly, I would go shoot at Bloomingdale's. I'm granted we would get input from the buyers. You know, this is for this particular age group, blah, blah, blah. But I would go shoot, bring back the photos, show the copywriters or the copy chief, and they would write to the story of the photo. And that's usually the way my experience is. But there are cases where, you know, it's, you know, shaving at night or something, and the other way around, like as opposed to what I did.
Right. Were you involved with that Take It Off?
No. But
shaving cream?
No, I
Gillette.
No, but Bob Minna's father was involved with that.
Probably. I didn't ask whether he was an art director or account guy.
I didn't ask either, but anyway, he was involved.
Oh, that's where I got that story from.
Yeah.
Ah, I see. So what was your biggest or most liked campaign that you've done?
Oh, well, I have 3.
or maybe one that you really liked and one that was really big?
Well, I think the ones I like were the most successful and the most powerful for me and my client.
Which were they?
So at Bloomingdale's, I did a Halston campaign. Arthur Elgo was the photographer, Tony Smalley was the male model, and Joan Severance was the female model. And we did a campaign. And that was, and I had the pleasure of meeting with Halston, and I told him what I was thinking, and he just loved my idea. So that's one.
That was a fashion ad, or
Well, it was definitely fashion, but
fragrance.
also his fragrance. And then at Revlon, I worked with Renato Granatsky, and it was for a color scent book. So there were different flavors per se, red, blue, things, depending on your mood. And that was a great project and very successful. And then on my own, Playtex was creating a new upscale brand. And I did the whole branding and shooting and all that stuff. So it was called, we came up with the idea of body views. So there were 3 different sections, and I hired Monica Bellucci. And
beautiful girl.
that was just, a great campaign and very successful.
Yeah, I represented her for years when she came from Italy before she really became an actress, When she went back, she became an actress. So I had the pleasure of repping her. Now, let me ask you a question, though.
I just wanted to talk who the talent was. The talent on that particular shooting was William Garrett, Bobby Brown.
Photographer, right?
Yeah.
Bobby Brown was makeup.
And Gray Scissor was hair. And the stylist was Sylvia, I can't remember her last name. And this was for my agency.
Now, a question, what was your worst disaster?
My worst disaster?
Of an ad or something that you put together and really thought it was great and was shot down or didn't work out?
I can't really think of anything offhand.
That you went away and all of a sudden you realized a day into the shoot that, holy shit, they're going to throw this out.
Well, I can't say anything of that nature really ever happened, because I was always there. If like Marvin Traub, the head of Bloomingdale's, didn't approve something. Oh, okay, I'll let you know. So working on the Yasmin bag, here's an example. So the whole point, and Richard Martino was the creative director, and I was the graphic designer, art director. I can't remember the photographer. But anyway, the whole idea was to promote Bloomies with the Bloomingdale, the underwear.
Right.
So we did the shot, showed it to Marvin Traub. Oh, no, can't show that. So I had to move this Yasmin down, 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 down. So ultimately, there was no back end.
Yasmin in the shot.
Right. There was Yasmin in the shot, but
no rear end.
No rear end. Yeah. So that was, I guess it was a different time,
Yeah.
So that was, it wasn't, a tragedy, but it's just an example of
you salvaged the shot.
Yeah, working with quote unquote the client, and Marvin Traub was the big client.
The whole idea was different.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they've got the final say. It's their dollar, and also they seem to know what the public wants. Even though the public probably would have loved to look at that.
I think it would have been more of a hit if it was. But anyway, it's still out there, and it's archived in the Cooper Hewitt Museum.
Really? Those bags were kind of iconic, right?
Yeah, they're wonderful to work on and be associated with. Yeah, they are.
A lot of people did them. A lot of artists did them. Designers.
Yes. The first two that I was involved with was Michael Volbrecht.
Volbrecht, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, one of them was, you know, the face with the eyes, beautiful bag. Then Antonio did some bags.
Antonio Lopez. Yeah.
And you know, but other ones were just graphic. Yeah.
You know, you don't hear anything about people like the Volbrechts or Antonio Lopez and how intertwined they were.
True, and I don't think, I mean, you know, there's illustrators now, but I think illustrators at this point are more considered in the fine art division. You know, I don't see them even in editorial magazines.
No. Joe Eula, people like that.
Joe Eula.
At all.
He did a bag for us, the Bloomingdale's.
I don't say they became famous, but people knew of them outside of our business.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they were famous in their own right. You know, Eula hung out with Halston and Elsa
and all those
Peretti
people.
And Stan Papchek.
Right.
And you know, Antonio.
And Antonio, who I remember Jerry Hall raves about him.
Yeah.
Because I think they met in Paris when the two of them had a quarter between them.
Yeah.
And
I think Antonio discovered.
Yeah. And they came to New York together and all that. And he was very instrumental in her career. I don't hear stories like that anymore.
No, I mean, you know, there is no Jerry Hall today or Janice Dickinson. There is, or Apple. There isn't any.
No.
You know, when I worked with, again, when I was a kid professionally, and, you know, Jerry Hall came, it was just, you know, thrilling.
Yeah, it was thrilling. It was exciting.
And, you know, I've always had great experiences. I never had, you know, at Bloomingdale's are always great. I mean, my Bergdorf shootings, on the other hand, sometimes there were traumas.
Who was the woman up there?
Dawn Mello. Dawn Mello was when I was there. And I can't remember the CEO. I could see his face.
And then the other girl took over. Who's still there now.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Linda Fargo.
Right.
That's right. Dawn Mello. And then Dawn, I couldn't remember the name because I don't think at that time I was that involved with the woman. And I wasn't really involved with the woman until I think Linda was there. I was at the end of Dawn Mello's.
Oh, okay.
You know, when I was at Ford.
But, you know, another thing is just going back to, I said I was thrilled about Jerry Hall. But, you know, Jerry Hall was not, you know, who she is today back then.
Right.
Even, I can't think of her name. So there's a lot of people who started as models and then progressed into movie stars.
Right. You know, Jerry had a great personality.
She did.
I happen to get to know her very well, and because Jerry, when she came to Ford, never wanted to be around Eileen Ford.
Oh, I wonder why.
Who was on the second floor. Because everything that Jerry did, Eileen hated.
Oh.
Even though she loved Jerry, but Eileen was the type of person that if you didn't drink your tea the right way, she drove you nuts about it, but you were the most beautiful girl and she'd bend over backwards for you as a model.
Right.
So Jerry would come and stay in the men's division. Eileen was on the second floor. My office with Jerry's was on the third floor, and the men's division was on the third floor. And we had a terrace, you know, which nobody else had. So Jerry would come up and hold court. So whatever guys were hanging out, guys hung out at agencies. Girls didn't hang out that much. And hold court and get these guys, tell them stories and then she'd walk out with them and the guys would be going.
And I'm sure all the adjoining buildings looking down were quite excited to see what was happening.
So you're right, the intimacy. So, I mean, and you do, I really don't think you hear about photographers. The only models that you hear about these days are the ones that there are very few, they're a handful, and I don't consider them models. I don't know about you.
Well, they are. I mean, they are the models of the
They're
moment.
celebrities.
Yeah. Yes. Which
But
is
could you compare them to like a Christy Turlington, Cindy Crawford,
no,
Tatiana,
you can't.
Naomi Campbell?
No, you can't, because these, it's unfortunately we live in a society, and I think it's getting less of celebrity worship. But these models, and I won't mention any names, some of them are celebrities and they don't push the limit, and they're tasteful. But there's other ones that you just can't get a grip. But no, I think I think a lot of models today, the ones that are celebrities, it's unfortunate the fame that they have.
Yeah.
I don't know them personally. They might be great people. I don't know, but what they project, I don't necessarily approve of. But another example, Renee Rousseau. She was, she was a model, and I worked with her, and she was, they're just so sweet, these people.
Right.
And now she's a movie star.
Now she's a writer.
Right.
She really writes, and she's got like 4 or 5 books in Denmark. And here was a girl who we had a cover girl contract for. And she said, am I going to go back to Denmark, or am I going to stay here and take this contract? It actually came down to that.
Wow.
And she turned down the contract and went back to Denmark. She did not want to get caught up in the whole scene, which, of course, I saw my dollar signs go down the drain.
Right.
But I respected her for her taking a stand.
I respect that too.
And saying, I've got a life. I want to go back to my home country. I want to bring up a family. I want to do all these things. And that's what she did. And I've spoken to her a few times over the years. My good friend Marion is very close to her. And she's, as you say, she's an actress. She's a writer. She's had a few books published. And very successful. And a great person, yes. And, well, Fred, it's coming time.
Okay.
It was nice to really see you again, even though I've seen you a few times since then. But it's nice to have you here on this on Era to be able to talk about your career. Kids, this is what happens behind the scenes. Fred J. Devito is the guy who puts everything together so the people up front can become famous.
Thank you very much, Joey.
Am I correct?
Well, in a sense, and I become famous too.
Well, of course,
but after the fact.
But the guy on the corner is not saying,
"Oh,
that's a Fred J. Devito."
No, they don't do that.
They're saying, "Oh, that's a Sante Dorazio."
Right.
Oh my God, look at that beautiful girl, Apollonia.
You're right. Behind the scenes is.
But they don't know that you're the guy that made it all possible.
Right. And, a lot of people don't even know what an art director is.
Yeah.
I just spoke with one of my grammar school students, and she goes, what is an art director? So, but anyway.
We've got so many people like Fred, not as great as Fred, but so many people who have created all this stuff and gave all the others an avenue to make themselves famous. And thank you, and I hope to see you soon. Let us know who you would love to see.
Thank you, Joey.
I'd love to talk to
Thank you, Joey.
Thank you.
And thank you, Nadia.
And thanks, Nadia and Mohammed.
And Mohammed.
Nadia and Mohammed Productions.